Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see you. How are we doing today? Oh, that's great. My name is Michael Dougherty. I'm the District Attorney and candidate for Attorney General of Colorado. We are going to take back the House this year, and we're going to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I feel a lot of energy and excitement and determination everywhere I go, and that fills me with hope. And I'm inspired for the work ahead. But I also want to recognize we are living through the most challenging time, the greatest threat to our democracy in my lifetime. We've gone through crises in this country before. We've only survived them because we had the right people in the right place, standing and fighting for our democracy and our future. That's why I'm running for Attorney General. I'm not term limited. I don't need a new job. I'm running because the moment calls for each and every one of us to do the best with our ability, our energy, and our resources to stand up and fight for this democracy and the rule of law against the lawless Trump administration. This moment calls for someone with real experience as a lawyer, real experience as a leader of large law offices, and someone with a proven track record of fighting and winning in court when so many people are counting on it, when we're trying to weather a crisis in Colorado. And right now, we're going through a crisis for this country. We need a prosecutor who's a progressive fighter for justice. Not just criminal justice, but environmental justice, economic justice, social justice, and racial justice. And I am that person, and the moment is now. I have a proven track record of fighting for justice. So I started as a prosecutor at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office after I graduated from law school. I'm the proud grandson of 4 Irish immigrants who came over on the boat with nothing but the shirts on their backs. Although I recently said that in front of our son, and he said, "No pants?" But I explained to him what you already know, which is they came here for the freedoms and opportunities offered to them then, a path that is denied to so many now. It's why since 2018, I've had an immigrant protection program in the district attorney's office to stand up and fight for immigrants in our community. It's why I've been doing Know Your Rights trainings in Boulder County since 2018, and over the last year, all around the state of Colorado, because the fight is on. And I'm not waiting until after the election to stand and say to ICE, you will not grab, kidnap, people off our streets without due process. And if you, thank you. And if you commit crimes in Colorado, I will hold you accountable. I want to be really clear about that. No one is above the law. I'm the one candidate in the race who will say that, but also has a proven track record to live up to it. So I've prosecuted police officers, I've prosecuted firefighters, I've prosecuted politicians, including Democrats, because doing justice means doing it without fear and without favor. That's what it means to stand and fight for the rule of law. And I went to community college coming out of high school because we didn't have much money, and I put myself through school by loading trucks at UPS on the night shift and being a member of the Teamsters and learning then what my parents had instilled in me, which the pride in being a member of a union and standing up and being part of the workforce. And when I graduated from law school, I went back to New York City. I'd been born in Brooklyn, New York, and I worked for the Manhattan DA's office for 13 years. I specialized in sex crimes and homicide cases, some of the most difficult and meaningful cases to work on in the justice system. I was then put in charge of 50 sex crimes prosecutors in the Manhattan DA's office, and ultimately I was put in charge of the day-to-day management and leadership of the entire office of 1,300 people. So when you think about leading the Attorney General's office, the largest law office in the state of Colorado, that experience as a leader of large law offices matters. Because that seat, the Attorney General's seat, cannot be run by someone who's a figurehead who just sets policy. You have to know what you're doing in the courtroom. You should ask every candidate, I'm glad you stand for this, but have you done it? Have you done it? Because right now it can't be a learn-on-the-job opportunity. And the courtroom is not a classroom. To me, we're living through a storm in this country, and I think about it as the equivalent of if I were driving to DIA tomorrow night, or if you were driving to the airport, and the storm is raging, and you're wondering if your flight's going to be canceled or maybe even postponed for a few hours. And you arrive and you walk down the terminal, and there's a pilot and a plane and another pilot and another plane. You go up to the first pilot, and the pilot says, I've been flying for 30 years. This is what I do. And it's a terrible storm, but we're going to get through this together. I promise you we will. I know what I'm doing. And you go up to the second pilot, and the second pilot says, no, I went to flight school, but I've never actually flown before. You're going to get on the first plane because the storm is upon us. I've led through crises in New York City and here in Colorado. I moved to Colorado to work for the Colorado Attorney General's office. I'm the only candidate in the race who's actually worked in the office that I now seek to lead. I moved here with my wife Antonia and our then one-year-old twins so that I could head up a wrongful conviction project to identify people who'd been wrongfully convicted in the state of Colorado. So for example, Robert Dewey. Mr. Dewey had served 18 years in state prison for murder he truly did not commit. And my work led to his exoneration and him being freed from state prison, but also the successful identification, arrest, and conviction of the actual killer. So that was justice for Mr. Dewey and justice for for the murder victim. Mr. Dewey had served 18 years in state prison. That's what it means to do justice with integrity. Then I was put in charge of the entire criminal section for the AG's office. And I handled cases all around the state of Colorado, including public corruption, election fraud, environmental crimes. And we're going to need to do a heck of a lot more to stand up and fight for our environment now with Trump rolling back the EPA. I also oversaw the Peace Officer Standard and Training Unit, a little known fact about the AG's office. The AG's office is in charge of law enforcement training for the entire state of Colorado. So if someone's joining the Denver Police Department, the La Plata County Sheriff's Office, Fort Morgan Police Department, the training is all the same and it all comes from the Attorney General. That's why law enforcement experience, prosecution experience, and a commitment to raising up law enforcement and then holding them accountable is so essential in the Attorney General's office. And for the last 8 years, I've had the honor of being the elected district attorney for Boulder County. And I've been a leader on criminal justice reform, launching the first mental health diversion program in the state of Colorado, the first Fresh Start warrant forgiveness program in the state. But I've also stood and fought for justice in horrific and consequential cases. I was the lead prosecutor on the King Soopers mass shooting case, the lead prosecutor on the Pearl Street firebombing case, an anti-Semitic, horrific hate crime committed against members of our community. Time and time again, I've been entrusted with the responsibility to lead through a crisis. And we're living through a crisis right now in this country. So my priorities, ladies and gentlemen, are clear. Stand and fight for the rule of law. That's why I'm running for Attorney General. I'll just share with you, do you remember where you were when Trump was winning a second term? I was sitting next to my wife, Antonia, and as the results were coming in and it was clear he was going to win, my wife, Antonia, looked at me and said, "You are becoming the Attorney General." She's a strong person, so I'm here. But what she really meant was what we know now, which is he's going to violate the law and violate the Constitution until someone stands up and says, "Not on my watch." That's the kind of work I've been doing my entire career. I launched this campaign last February, and to me, being the Attorney General means being the people's lawyer. That's why I'm the one candidate who's traveled the entire state of Colorado. On weekends alone, I'm pointing to young Sam in the back, he's a fellow road warrior, as we call ourselves. We've traveled 16,000 miles since starting the campaign, just in Colorado. It means getting all around the state and telling people my priorities are our environment, environmental justice. So for example, the Suncor plant along DIA that we all drive by, that plant's been contaminating, harming communities of color and low-income communities for years. And last year they paid a $10 million fine. They made $2 billion last year. That's where corporations for too long have been put above people. With me, it will be the reverse. I promise you that. And consumer protection and affordability. So think about the last time you got a scam email or phone call. Probably yesterday. When's the last time you heard about one of those crime rings being brought to justice? It's about holding them accountable and working with law enforcement partners to do more to protect Coloradans. And then also go after the people who hurt them, as I've done in Boulder County. So for example, 2 years ago, Phil Weiser and I teamed up. We have a strong partnership and we teamed up on an action against an unscrupulous realty company. It's the first case of its kind in Colorado history, where this realty company had been scamming tenants out of security deposits and using hidden and deceptive fees. Phil and I secured a $1 million settlement on that civil suit for all the victims in that case. So it's about consumer protection and affordability at a time where people are really struggling, but also making sure that we're fighting for civil rights. And that's why I've been doing these Know Your Rights trainings. That's why I launched the first hate crimes initiative of any DA's office in the state of Colorado. And that's why I continue to fight to make sure that people are being represented, including those who have been marginalized and vulnerable for far too long. So my priorities include public safety, environmental justice, consumer protection, and doing what I can also to protect abortion access and reproductive health care here in Colorado. But there's so much more work for us to do. I'm deeply committed to the work. I'd be honored to have your support. If it's okay, I'll stop here and take questions. Is that okay?
Sure. We had some other questions. I think you've answered a lot. Will you work in alliance with other AGs to defend the facts, the law, and science?
Yes, yes, and yes. And that's already started. So I've already met with the Democratic AGs Association 3 times since launching the campaign. And I've been in meetings with attorneys general from around the country so that those alliances are in place on day one. I have the ability to hit the ground running on day one, but those partnerships and alliances matter a lot because the reason Phil Weiser has been so successful in fighting for Colorado is not every lawsuit is being handled solely by the Colorado Attorney General's office. It's through those partnerships that we're stronger and better together. So yes.
What's Colorado doing to prevent ICE detention camps from coming here?
Not enough. We need to do more. Private prison should be banned in the state of Colorado. Do you agree with me? We currently have 2 private prisons in the state, at the state prison level. And quite frankly, if anything comes out of us standing up and fighting against Trump, it's also looking in the mirror and saying, what can we do better in our own state? And it's getting rid of those 2 private prisons at the state level, Bent County and Crowley County. I went to the Crowley County Prison as part of the Prison Reform Task Force for Colorado a few years ago. I was appointed to represent all the district attorneys on that task force. 751 sex offenders in the prison that day. 751. They have to go through sex offender treatment before they could be released. Number of programs for the sex offenders in that private prison, do you want to guess? 0 is correct. 0. That's an injustice. Profit has no role in the justice system at the state level, and certainly for immigrants who are being kidnapped off our streets and shipped out without due process. So I'm going to support legislation to ban private prisons in the state of Colorado. I'm going to sue the federal government. Anytime, for example, in Kansas, there's a municipality that denied permits to the feds when they tried to set up a detention center. As AG, I will stand alongside municipalities who take that strong principled stand and represent them in court. I will also take ICE to court and demand, take your mask down and identify yourselves. That has to happen. I've worked horrific cases in my career, gang homicides, the King Soopers, Pearl Street firebombing for the last 28 years. This is what I've done. And I've never seen officers and detectives wear masks. It's to terrify and terrorize people, and it's unacceptable.
What are you doing or will you do to eliminate all the new laws Trump created, and how can you prevent a convicted felon from running for president?
Well, it's a good start. What I would say is this. My friends and former colleagues from the Manhattan DA's office were the ones who prosecuted him in New York City, and that resulted in the conviction. And I was so proud of them for what they did, and then so disappointed in us as a country that we then elected a convicted felon back into the White House. That was terrible. And that should be motivation alone for us to stand and make sure in 2026 we flip the House so we don't have a government that's controlled in all 3 branches by Republicans. Because the Republicans have bent the knee and do everything that Trump asks, even when it's immoral and illegal. So there's no law that we could pass other than the ones we have on the books, but where the Attorney General plays a key role is that the people, as the people's lawyer, taking Trump to court anytime he violates the rule of law. And you've seen Phil Weiser do that with a lot of success. And I'm committed to doing that and committed in following Phil's strong stand on this. That's why you have to have experience as a lawyer and a leader of large law offices.
We've been hearing so much about prosecutors being overloaded and not having enough support. We see federal prosecutors resigning from their positions, being fired, et cetera. So, it takes a lot of work. And how are we going to, rebuild the judicial system and just the personnel? Any thoughts on that?
Well, the question you just asked is a really important one. Also, when you think about the Colorado Attorney General's office, because Phil Weiser has done a great job recruiting and retaining high-level, outstanding attorneys, some of whom I supervised when I was the head of the criminal section there. They're the ones who went and prosecuted Tina Peters. A lot of people try to take credit for that conviction of Tina Peters. It was the Attorney General's office and the Mesa County DA's office that teamed up on that case. But Phil's done a great job, but that's because Phil has integrity and he instilled in them the mission to do the right thing. And you look at what happened, to your question, at the federal level when Trump asked prosecutors to do the wrong thing, and they've left in droves, including friends of mine from the Manhattan DA's office who had gone on to become federal prosecutors. They will not work for Donald Trump. They will not work for an administration that is lawless. So they've left. So the AG's office has to step up and do more. Because right now, when someone pollutes our air, land, and water, there are not enough federal prosecutors to go around. When someone engages in public corruption, there are not enough federal prosecutors to go around. We cannot wait for help to come from the U.S. Attorney's Office, including here in Colorado. And I have a strong working relationship with them, but they do not have enough people. So it's incumbent upon us to fill those gaps at the state level to make sure people's rights and our environment are being protected. And at the federal level, it's going to take time to build it back, period.
I have two questions. My first one is you mentioned about not having the for-profit prisons. What would be the difference in having, I don't know what you would call it, but a not-for-profit prison, and who would cover those costs? And with our budget, the Colorado budget the way it is that possible for us to have that? And sort of in that same light, you were just saying about we don't have enough attorneys. Isn't their budget under the state? And with what we're going through now, could we fill those positions when we don't have the money?
So I'll take them in reverse order. When I say they don't have enough attorneys, I mean the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutors. Here in the state, Phil Weiser's done a great job building up the office, and the legislature's given him more money and more attorneys over the years. That office has enough staff to do some great work, and that's what we've seen. Federal prosecutors, including, for example, in Minnesota, when they were told how to investigate the killings of Ms. Good and Mr. Preddy, they started leaving in droves, leaving behind cases that are still supposed to be prosecuted, and they don't have attorneys there. So that's at the federal level. So I'm glad you asked me to clarify. State level, we have a lot of great attorneys in the AG's office. The other part of your question, the two private prisons at the state level, Bent County and Crowley County, those should be transferred to state-run facilities. So I'm not saying closing them down, but I'm saying look at the data that shows that they have lower rates of success on rehabilitation, lower rates of pay for employees who work there, and less of a tie to the communities that they're in. Those should be state-run facilities, and I want to see that transfer happen. Colorado's paying millions and millions and millions of dollars to private for-profit corporations to hold our people and to fail our people. Those should be state-run facilities.
Is there a legal basis for enforcing no masks for ICE?
So there are two options when it comes to getting ICE to take down their mask. The first is to go to the legislature, and there'll be a bill introduced in the next 2 weeks in Colorado to demand that ICE take down their mask. I will be supporting and testifying, working hard for that bill. Also, we can go to the courts, and Phil Weiser's done that in joining a lawsuit demanding that a federal judge order ICE to take down their mask and identify themselves. And we're going to continue to have to push for this. The other thing we could do is what you've done a lot of in this room, which is speaking out and standing up. I know there are times we may feel powerless right now and feel like we're not having an impact, but we still do. There's still something to be said for the power of the people. And I look at, for example, the public lands that they're going to sell off for profit in the big terrible tax bill last July. Do you remember? They stripped out the provision to sell off our public lands because of the outcry by the American people. It wasn't a lawsuit, it wasn't any legal action, it was the American people. So we still have a voice. And I think this gentleman had a question.
Our governor recently vetoed a bill requiring not requiring 2 elections, but just one to have union representation. The second one would require 2/3, and the legislature passed that and he vetoed it. I'd like to know how you feel about that. And then Do you want my second question now, too?
It's up to you, sir.
My second question is a lot of very knowledgeable, experienced, smart journalists think that we've already lost our democracy in this country, that Donald Trump won't accept Democrats winning in 2026, and unless a few Republicans stand up and don't vote to not allow it, that democracy may well be over in this country now.
Thank you. So
Thank
the first question is an important one. And what's your name, sir?
Norm Frank.
Norm highlighted that the governor vetoed the Worker Protection Act, saying that unions have to have 2 votes, workers have to have 2 votes before they approve of a union, and that the second vote has to be over 2/3 majority. And what I would respectfully say to the governor is, let's do that for your next election. Let's say that if you're going to be elected, we have to have a second vote before we say it's official, and it has to be over 66%. That's not the way elections work. I say it with a smile, but I really mean it. If people want to form a union, it should be one election. And if they want to form a union, it should be a majority. That's how it should work in this country. And I come from New York, where I grew up in a family of firefighters, teachers, and cops. And we were proud to be union families. And the power of the unions there is really significant. And workers were treated better as a result. And in Colorado, there have been efforts to diminish the power of the union and hurt the working class. And that's gone on for too long. And this bill being vetoed was another example of it. It had strong bipartisan support. How often do you hear those words? Strong bipartisan support. So I supported the Worker Protection Act when it was introduced last session. I spoke out in strong support of it and then against the governor when he vetoed it. I respect the governor, but that was a mistake, and that is wrong. And I'm going to support the Worker Protection Act again, because we need to do more to lift up the working class in this state, not keep them down. The second question. So if this is, Norm, this is the greatest threat to our democracy in my lifetime. So you're right to ask it. And to me, the fight is on. And that's why I'm here. And that is why you're here. Because if we really thought we were powerless, we'd all be sitting at home in the fetal position, watching the news, thinking it's over. It is not over. But we have to fight. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about how the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But I really appreciated the addendum offered by President Obama recently. He said, Dr. King was right, but it does not bend by itself, that we have to push. So I'm here to push. I will never give up. I feel that to my core. I love this country, but it's time to fight for this country. I grew up in a family that was proud that my grandparents came here. And I'm proud to be an American, but it's time to defend what that means. That's why I'm here. And through my whole life, people have thought, you don't have a chance. I went to community college. No one thought I was going to go to Cornell. I went to the Manhattan DA's office. No one thought I'd be the youngest supervisor in the Manhattan DA's office. Everything I've done in my career has been a fight. And now the fight's for the state of Colorado. That's why I'm here. It's time for each one of us to stand and fight. You know that. That's why you're here. We need to reach the people in the streets and make sure that they know that. Because you being here, to me, it's like that old joke about how if you're showing up for a motivational seminar, you don't need to be there. You're already motivated. You know the fight's on, but it's incumbent upon us to stand and do everything we can with every bit of energy, ability that we have. And for me, as a public servant and attorney and someone who's fought for justice his entire career, it means being the next Attorney General. But thanks for your question, Norm. You're absolutely right to ask it.
You've got a crazy schedule. Thank you so much.
No, it's my honor to be here. And Sam, who's in the back, has a petition. I'm going through petitions, but also caucus and assembly. I'd be honored to have your support. If you're a registered Democrat, you could sign the petition to help me get on the ballot. Then I will also be going through caucus and assembly. My name is Michael Dougherty. I'm running for Attorney General. I respond to every email I get directly. I also respond to every call I get. So if you like, I will give you my cell phone number now. If you want to take out a piece of paper or take out your phone, I'm happy to give it to you. You look like a trustworthy group.
And I've gotten emails from them in the evening.
My number is 303-590-5176. When I became district attorney in 2018, I made a promise to the people of Boulder County that I return every email, I answer every call, and I meet with everyone to request a meeting.
And
I
he's
haven't-
sleep deprived.
Well, I thankfully have a supportive family, and I have an 8-year track record of doing that. The people of Colorado need a people's lawyer who's going to show up for every community in Colorado and has a proven track record of fighting for justice. We cannot lose this moment to Norm's question. It is critical that your next Attorney General have the ability to stand and fight for justice for all Coloradans. That's why I'm here. Thank you very much, everyone.